Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
This is Ash and Simon from the Nice Game headquarters, and we want to start a new series to inform you about the battlegrounds in the game and about the different eras that you are going to go through when you play the Vampire Heritage campaign.
That's right. So we have some of this stuff will be new. A lot of the stuff, in particular in the first video, will be things that we've previously shown for Kickstarters. But we're starting and we're going to go through era by era each of the 7 eras that you play in the entire campaign, and each one of those is made up of 3 chapters or 3 games. And this is era 1.
We'll start with the first battleground, the clans high and low. What this represents is the vampiric version of the feudalist power struggle between the lower and the higher classes. So as you vampire experts might know, in the Middle Ages the clans were divided into high and low clans, much like humans were, and this is how we represent it.
Right, so as vampires, the players are very, very ancient, and they're really beyond all of these struggles. They're so fancy that they don't even become aligned with the aristocratic vampires that people can see. We have sort of wheels above this, so we can manipulate this in either direction. We can foster the support of the noble vampires that are currently in power, or we can foster rebellion at our whim. It's up to us and up to our ability to impose our will on the other players. So that's what's happening thematically in this battleground. It's about the forces of change and the voices of stability.
The next battleground is the Beast Within. This represents the struggle of your ancient vampire and your clan in the game, or your bloodline, with your inner beast that you're trying to suppress, that you're trying to keep from taking control.
Yeah, and the key thing here is that vampires don't necessarily follow what you'd call traditional moral tenets. Because they live for so long, the most important thing for them is consistency and following a certain track in order to feel like a coherent moral sort of psychological entity. So we'll get into this later in the mechanics, but the concept here is that you will be punished if you consistently change your moral worldview at the end of the game, and you'll be rewarded if you're able to be consistent and have like an outlook that makes sense to you, because if you live for 1,000 years, you'll go a bit crazy otherwise.
And finally, this is the last battleground, the War of the Princes. This represents the kind of scheming and intrigue taking place between the different vampiric court factions, the different vampiric princes of Europe at the time. And this represents basically one of the core things that we like about Vampire the Masquerade.
From a theme point of view, one of the things that's going on here is that as players throughout this game and throughout the entire campaign, we are above even these sort of struggles that are happening across the world and in the vampire universe. So we don't particularly care if the northern, the eastern, the southern, or the western vampires come to dominate various countries in Europe, unless we've invested in those factions, or unless our opponents have invested in those factions. So that's one thing thematically going on, is that we are separate from the forces that we're manipulating in this battleground. And that sort of follows through everything from the clans to the characters that you influence and things like that. The only other thing to point out is that the assets we have in the tabletop sim are little wooden cubes at the moment, whereas in the final production they will of course be wooden anks.
So the first era, as an introduction, is kind of our way to make it easy for players to get into the game. So all of the battlegrounds in this first era are kind of on the simpler side, and this Clans High and Low battleground shows this especially well, because basically all it is like a tug of war between the red nobles and the green rebels. So whenever you recruit a character, you have to apply all of their attributes to the individual battlegrounds. And for the Clans High and Low, you would take a look at the top left one of these colored gems, So if I were to recruit the Executioner in my bloodline, because he's a nobleman and red in that gem, I would simply move this political token one space towards the red side.
Right. So this happens every time we recruit a character, whether we want to or not. At the end of the game, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the final result of this board, and if it's in the red area, I feel like a weather presenter. If it's in the red area, this means that the noble vampires have managed to stamp out the descent in this age, and if it's in the green, this means that the forces of change have been triumphant. So if the red have won, basically, you're going to get 2 points. All players will get 2 points for every red vampire in their bloodline. So this Executioner is sitting pretty because he backed the right horse. And it's good to have him in your bloodline. However, if the green had won, it would be the opposite. So it's a very simple tug of war. The more you recruit red, the more likely that red is to win, and the more that you're investing in red, and vice versa with green. Now, the other way that we can influence this is with the scheme. So there is a series of schemes that each clan has, and there's also what we call battleground schemes, which every battleground has a rule card and a scheme card, and this is a way that you can form a coterie and get them in there to influence the outcome of this battleground, usually in a pretty direct way. So that's all the rules for this one, with the exception of
the decisive victory.
Yes.
So there's the tug of war going on, and as long as you're in the middle, nothing much exciting can happen. But as soon as you get closer towards one of the edges or towards one of the ends of the chain, a decisive victory could happen. So if by any kind of machination you manage to get the token to go to the last space, all characters of that color immediately gain power on account of the decisive victory that has just happened. And then we're going to reset the track to the 0 space.
And we'll get into what that means in the strategy section.
For the Beast Within Battleground, again, we have a certain simple rule set, and in this case, it's actually going to stay with us for a lot of the campaign, because this one isn't swapped out until very late in the campaign. And the way it works is, again, very simple. When we just recruited the Executioner, the first thing we did was apply the red gems effects to the other battleground, and now we're looking at the second gem, the blue, in this case blue gem, that could either be blue or yellow. And what we're looking at here is how did we act last time, and this token right there on the board signifies that the last time around we've played a blue character, which means kind of more passive and reactive as opposed to more active and forceful yellow. So since we've played a blue character the last time, and the Executioner is also blue, that means we're going to get to move up on this battleground.
But what if it was yellow?
Well, if it was yellow, what we would do is we would instead flip the token and move down a step, indicating that we've not acted consistently this time around. But what it also does when you do that is you actually get to draw another clan scheme. So while you're not gaining points and in fact losing points, you might sometimes choose to do this in order to gain more options on the clan scheme side. But we'll get into that in more details later.
Yes. Final 2 rules for this section are that at the end of each round, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this battleground and see who among us is the first among equals. So the player that is furthest up this track, at the end of each round, is going to take that token there, showing that they are the first player in the next round. And then we simply go clockwise around the table from there. So the first player will change depending on the choices here. And just like the Clan's High and Low, there is a battleground scheme which we can use to directly influence that. And the way this works is we're going to form a coterie, a small group to carry out this mission, and we're going to activate each of them. So if they're all yellow and you've got 4 of them in this coterie, you might zip up 4 spaces. Or if they're a mix, you might be able to get clan schemes and then move back up to where you were.
Right, and the only thing maybe in case it's not been clear enough yet is the points you gain from this battleground is exactly the difference or exactly what it says on the spot where your clan's
Right.
token is
So if you're
standing.
consistent, you're going to end up with 6 points in the bank. If you're inconsistent, you're going to lose 8 points in the worst possible scenario, with a lot of points in between. And that's how it works.
So the third battleground, the War of the Princes, is mechanically an area control game. And what it means is that, again, when we're looking at the character that we've recruited, we're now going to take a look at the third gem here. The third gem signifies the geographic aspect of each character. They can be either one of those 4 colors that you see on the board or multicolor. And what it does is you're gonna, when you recruit this character, be able to move 1 white cube 1 space on the board, taking in this case control of a whole province. And the other thing that's special is this area in the middle here where I've placed my cube. It's of special importance in that it counts as 2 areas for purposes of seeing who's won this struggle. So
Right.
in this case, the blues would be out of luck.
That's right. Now, what does this mean for a player? At the end of the game, just like the clans high and low, which is red and green, what we're going to do is we're going to see which faction has won, the north, east, south, or west, and it is possible to have a shared victory if they both. So let's say in this case the southern vampires are winning. What this means is that for every player, every one of those vampires in their bloodline is going to be worth 2 points. So what you want to do is maybe pick a color, invest in it, and then you'll get points if they manage to win at the end of the game. Like the others, there's a battleground scheme that allows you to directly affect this, and that can make a big difference, particularly in the final turn.
Right. So the clans high and low is kind of a interesting battleground in that you have to choose your approach to it very wisely. There's wide swings that are possible depending on who wins. And if you invest heavily in one color, but the other color wins, in many cases it means you're out of the running.
Yeah, so there's basically 2 approaches here. I would say the first one is get into it, pick a color, and you, if you do that, you're going to make basically your entire game about focusing on that because it's such a strong investment. It's very much win or lose sort of situation. So you can really strongly pick a color and then pursue that. Or you can try to just hedge your bets and try to have a sort of mixture. It is technically possible for nobody to win points in this battleground if the token ends in the middle space, but it's pretty unlikely. Probably either red or green will be dominant. But if you manage to have a mixture of both of them, you can ride that one out and kind of cut your losses. This one here, I like to pick a side.
Right. I mean, that's, I think, human nature to try and pick your side and stick to it and hate everyone who's not on your side.
Right.
But in my opinion, depending especially on the numbers of players, there are different approaches here.
Yeah.
You can, in a 2-player game, you're gonna most likely end up with a battle to the bitter end,
Yeah,
or kind of both players
I like
ignoring it.
just doing it. Like if they commit green, just follow them. That's the great thing is
Right,
that these
that's true.
battlegrounds,
That's
I'm
also
not
possible.
linked to it
Yeah.
at all. We can both decide that we're going to back the same side there, and what that means is that you're going to have to edge out a space between the 2 of you on the other battlegrounds or in other ways. For instance, depending on the clans in play, depending on the ancilla that you've got upgraded, it's possible to place vampires in torpor. And so on. And a very important matter in this one is the player order, because there's a last player advantage. So if you can manipulate that using the other battlegrounds, that can really make a huge difference.
So one thing you can do in this battleground is you can try and go for decisive victories, but it's kind of a hard thing to pull off because while you are gaining power doing it, you're also lowering your chances of winning the same thing. So you're going to invest a lot into red, and then there's going to be a lot of power placed on your red characters, but they kind of lose some value towards the end game because you've already used those advances on this track to reset the track.
Yeah, I mean, that's really nice when some characters in torpor or something, and you've got this window where you've got like way more than them and it'll make the biggest difference. The other thing to take into account with the power is it's power. It's not victory points. So there might be some points where you need power because you can spend this on recruiting characters and so on. And so it could be worth tipping it over towards a decisive victory, even if it doesn't particularly help you in the victory points race compared to other players, just because you otherwise have 0 power, and that can really scupper you as well.
So the Beast Within, strategy-wise, one important thing to note here is that the points you're getting here are going to be locked in. There's no way someone can be like mess with you here. That will, if you're at the farthest spot here, you're gonna have those 6 points, and no one can take them away from you.
Yeah, so this is a nice focal point for new players because it's very clear what your relationship is with the pieces. Like that is the La Sombra's final score in this game. So that's a really nice focus. The other thing to consider is the turn order. And I think this is maybe the biggest thing happening on this board is the turn order. If you're able to manipulate this so that you are in the right turn order at the end of the game, it can make a huge difference.
Right, you can even get a double turn sometimes by being last in the last round and then moving ahead with a nice scheme play, and then basically surprising your opponents with by being able to make 2 turns in a row.
Yeah, and you can do that sometimes really reactively. Like on your turn, you might recruit, you see the new character as someone you like, and you could be like 2-3 steps from the first place. And it certainly wasn't your plan to do this, but when Dante comes up and the Inquisition's out, like you have to do it. It's something that that's very fluid actually.
So the War of the Princes, it's one of my favorites, and it's a natural place to focus your strategy on, just because this area control thing just grabs your attention. And as a board game player, I'm focused on always trying to paint the map in my colors.
There's dudes on the map sort of thing, and you can remove other players' cubes and things like this. Well, they feel like other players' cubes, but they're kind of not.
Right, so that's the important thing here. There's an emergent situation here where you always have to see what other players are doing. You might form alliances with other players trying to push colors, but if someone goes in and invests a whole lot of resources to make the other guys win, you might still end up in a situation where just saying, okay, I'm going to take these black characters now too, just because you can't come up against it.
Yeah, and this is, I think, maybe even more of a gamble than the red-green in some ways, depending on the player count. And the reason I say that is because it's sort of more difficult to pull off. You only have one of these sides out of the 5 possible colors that you're trying to push. But the payoff can be greater because in the red-green, they're going to be, all things being equal, evenly split among all the players. And it's pretty easy to invest in red or green if you decide to. Whereas if you push, say, the northern vampires, and you're the only one pushing them, you could be the one to get all of those victory points at the end of the game. So I think this is like a pretty high risk sort of strategy.
Right. I mean, one thing that we've not mentioned yet, and we kind of wanted to keep for later anyway, is that what informs this a lot is clan choice as well, because certain clans will be better at getting the vampires they want. And so for them, different strategies are interesting than for others that have their strength in different areas.
Right, and finally we wanted to show this view of all 3 battlegrounds in play at once, because individually the tug of war and the area control and this sort of scoring thing where it's about your own consistency in choosing either the yellow or the blue vampires, they're very simple to kind of solve. Like you might decide to invest in red and consistently go for red, and so when you're looking at characters to recruit, that's the choice that you'll try to make. In the center, you might support the eastern vampires, and likewise that's the choice you'll make. And then in this one here, you'll simply look at the token that you have face up, and you'll try to recruit them again. So blue or yellow.
Right, but that doesn't mean that all of these things will be available in the queue, right?
Exactly. If we take a look at the queue, there are always 5 characters that are available to be recruited into your bloodline. So these are the choices that you have to select from, and you always need to recruit. There's a few things going on there. One is that every time you recruit somebody, each of their attributes will modify each battleground, whether you like it or not. Let's say you like this guy for the yellow and the east. You like this guy for the yellow and east, but you were sort of backing the red. And likewise with the magistrate, you like the red, but you were trying to support the east, and he is going to move a western vampire, which isn't so good for you. So what you've got is a constrained choice going on here. The other vampires on the two left ones, you could maybe recruit them, but they're going to cost power. So the point is that even in an individual character, you have to make the best of what might be a mixed dish, where some of it's good, some of it's bad, and that gets sort of multiplied by the queue, where you will be taking characters that therefore other players can't take. So we just wanted to show you that each of the individual battlegrounds is a very simple puzzle, and it has to be simple because it's being connected to this moving plates kind of thing, where you're trying to maybe make the most of this situation while hurting yourself the least in that other situation.
Personally, I prefer hurting others the most while gaining a little benefit for myself.
That's the vampire way.
Right, so that just about wraps it up for the content that you're going to see in the first era. Of course, we've not talked about missions a lot. We've not talked about what the clans are doing. We've not talked about how you're going to upgrade characters and character abilities and how that impacts your choices. But essentially, we view the game as a huge ecosystem where you try to steer it in the direction that you want it to go, but you're never going to control all of the pieces. So both for players to get into the game through this first era and for our introduction here in these videos, we want to make sure that we take enough time for each of the individual aspects so that you can kind of ease yourself into this big thing that we're making.
Yeah, so in this is the first of seven videos where we'll be talking about battlegrounds. The first one is the longest because we have 3 battlegrounds to introduce. From then on, there'll only be a single battleground that's changing in each era, so stay tuned for those videos. We'll also have a video series on all of the other components. So there'll be one on each clan, there'll be one on the campaign components as you talked about, and each one of those will be talking about the rules, the thematic sort of stuff going on, and also the strategy that we have, which I'm really am keen to steal what he has.
No, come on, you're just selling yourself too short here.
It's a ploy.
You're the leader, you're the current leader in this campaign that we have. So
that's it. Thanks for watching. Tschüss.